What's up, froggers?
What's up, froggers?
Welcome to frogvlog. Okay, fucking Christ. Okay, so I've put a new setup here. They included these things that are sort of like a mount. You know, like they stick. They're not meant to be moved though. They've got, you know, like glue on the bottom, but the glue isn't very good, and I don't want to put real glue on my dashboard because right now I know even if this holds, I can take it up with no residue. But so one of the I've got it on here and I've got it trying its best. I pressed it down for about 3 minutes, but it seemed a little wobbly. But it's definitely doing better than the Velcro, which, you know, didn't work at all. And I don't know. We'll see how it works. If it doesn't fall off on me here, then I'll probably, I don't know, test it out in a bit more strenuous environment. But ultimately, I think no matter what, I'm going to still have to buy a mount. You know, none of these solutions are working very well. I think mounts is still like the one way to do it in your car. Because, you know, I'm putting together that like clips thing from all of my failed attempts that actually had recordings. You know, that guy. You know, so I don't know. So you'll see some of the issues I had in there, and like with the one that actually got recorded with the bad clipping audio, which this one might also have. Who knows? You might not be able to hear me at all. That one you'll see how the helmet works fairly well, you know, but I can't use my rear view mirror, and that was very difficult backing out of a parking spot in a busy parking lot without my rear view mirror. So, you know, but something I wanted to talk about that I've been writing a bit about today is the issue I have with groups, right? And I don't mean groups in general, right? Because humans are tribal people. We are groups. But one thing I find pretty interesting is I keep coming back to two groups that I like, which are hippies in a way, right? Like real hippies, and cowboys, you know. And really, you don't find these groups much anymore. Now, right now I'm in contact with this girl I met down in Florida who is really the hippie lifestyle, right? Now, she doesn't follow like the hippie philosophy as I would define it when I say, you know, the hippie group. But, you know, she lives in a van with 5 other people. You know, it's probably a bit degenerate, but she is not phony, right? And most of the other people, I didn't like any of the other people in the van. Like, they were okay, but I wouldn't want to talk to them ever again. They weren't phony either, right? Like, my issues with them were completely otherwise. So, I found this really interesting because even in the most sort of like dedicated of groups, there's still this phoniness to it. And this might just be me, you know, like, and I'll completely accept that if everybody agrees. But, you know, like, bring up like gun nuts, you know, like you go on K and it's a pretty good group. You know, I like the gun nuts group. Sometimes I consider myself to be in that. But the issue is there is a major gatekeeping issue, and I'm not against gatekeeping, but in this one it's the sort of gatekeeping where it's like, oh, when you can't be interested in this, you fit into this other role, right? And I fucking hate that. Like, a hippie is never gonna, like a true hippie is never gonna come up to you and tell you that you can't hang out at their little van party because, I don't know, you're too white or some shit, right? If they tell you that, it's a pretty clear indicator. And this is sort of a form of gatekeeping in itself, but I'm defining the group, so fuck off. If they tell you that, they're probably fairly phony, right? Because the true hippie philosophy do with how other people perceive them. Has nothing to do about whether or not other people, consider them to be something that they are or not. They don't care. And that's one of the biggest things in life, right? Because you can have these people all day long, and I'm one of them, that'll say, they don't care what other people think, but then you've got these anxieties, or simply it's just, a phony act, where you will care what people say. Or, even if you don't, you'll start judging other people, right? And in my mind, in my opinion, I try to stop doing this sort of stuff, but I try to phrase it more as like a discussion of it, which is what this is. Or you'll be a bit of a fucking hypocrite in it, where you will be judging other people in ways that you say you don't give a fuck about how the other people judge you. And I think that's a waste of time, and it's a complete break of the philosophy, right? Hippies, the true hippie group, in my opinion, absolutely do not care about outside perception, and they will not judge outsiders. The only people they will judge is themselves, right? Because hippies have this sort of thing about them where it's just about the situation, So, to jump over to cowboys are this exact same way, They're really just about the situation, and when I say cowboy, I mean like Texas Ranger, cattle rancher, this whole like mix of cowboy that we've sort of come up with outside of the media's embellishments. So these people, they're in the situation. They live fairly day by day. It's nothing about other people and what they think of them. It's about, how can we handle this? How can we keep everything close-knit and everything? And I think one group that doesn't really exist as a group in this form, but it might need to with how things are going, is sort of a homesteaders group, right? Because as the world pushes forward, the idea of homesteading, it picks up track because a lot of people will have the same observations and decide that it's the right outcome. But in the majority, it's becoming less and less the norm. Because when you try to remove yourself from an ever-growing society, the people in that society are going to feel like they're being judged in a form. And we already see this all the time, right? But I think the issue is homesteading is a fairly solitary activity. It's not like a commune where you take 10 to 40 people and you have a very sort of similar like hippie mentality where like everyone can come around as long as you're like cool about it. And homesteading, it's very commonly it's like a family thing, or an individual thing. It never goes above a family. It's not a bunch of people creating a homestead. And people might argue that it's simply because a homestead with a bunch of people just becomes a commune, which is a possibility. But one of the important things that I'm really trying to say here is these two groups I keep coming back to because trends don't affect them, right? There's no hippie trends that real hippies get affected by, right? Whereas real like gun nuts are completely affected by trends. It's because their sort of group ideology is centered around this area that's being developed, right? What's there to develop around cowboys? There's not much. And what's there to develop around hippies? It's simply that most groups are around things that there's stuff to develop on, and there's changes that can be made. Whereas if you build a group simply around sort of like a community, right? There's nothing to change. Like there will be differences between subgroups in here, right? Like, you know, fucking cowboys in Alberta aren't going to be the same as cowboys in Texas, but it's still the same ideology in a huge way. And I think that's sort of an important thing to hint on, and I'd like to write a bit more on it. Right now I've got some scraps written up, but there's nowhere else to really go on it. Okay, so this stick glue thing is not going to work. You know, you can't take the camera in and out without ripping it up off the dash. And you know, like, if you hold it there another couple minutes, which is what I just did, then it stays okay, right? But how long is that going to last? So I've got a couple more of these that they included with it. I'll try those out. But I think I'm going to look for a mount. Maybe look for one I can get nearby so I don't have to wait for it to ship to me. So, yeah. On a completely other note from the Cowboys and hippie stuff, people are packed in like sardines, right? And I mean, you know, I live on like the very edge between fairly rural and quite urban, you know. So the area I'm in here is a bit suburban, and that's not what I mean when I say where I live, because you know, you watched it. It took me a little while to get out here, and I don't know, I guess I'd say I'm like on the edge of suburban and rural, right? That'd probably be the best place to put it. But you know, so almost anything I want, I have to come into the more suburban part, and anything worldly I want, I have to go into the more urban part. And you know, it's 7 o'clock out here, and there's tons of people. And I mean, it's not like it's a real problem, you know, like everything's set up for this many people and more, but why do we have so many people? You know, like, is this just the natural consequence of linear time? Like I don't know, I used to live up in a very, very small town, right? Like 400 people, amongst like, I don't know, maybe like 80 houses. So, and this is spread across, oh, there it goes. What did I say? And this is spread across, you know, like a good distance. I don't know, I'd say like 10 miles, maybe. Probably too small. But, and it was up in the Appalachian. And this is where I first sort of realized that people can live in small groups. And by small groups, I don't mean family structures. I mean, you know, like villages. Because that's basically what this was. It was a fucking village with a gas station. So, you know, we got a lot of like tourists and stuff through because it was a bit of a shortcut through into the Virginia area. But so, you know, a lot of people would come through. There was a lot of like wildlife and stuff up around there, and you know, so I ran into a lot of people, and I wasn't there very long, but I was there long enough to experience this extremely small group environment, and I think it stuck with me, and that I really don't like being around large amounts of people. But I also don't like being around such a small amount of people that it's like they're the only people, you know. And it's different if it's a small enough amount of people where you can know everybody like extremely closely. Like take the neighborhood that Charlotte accepts Humbert into in Lolita, right? He knows everybody in the neighborhood, but he doesn't really know them, You know, like, he knows their names, he sees them all the time, but, you know, whether this is Humbert's personality or just how it is, he knows some of them very well, right? They're like friends, but there's too many people to be on that level with. So it becomes this classic sort of like neighborhood thing where you're not a community, you know. Like I feel like community is placed on way too big a group sometimes, where you may have thousands of people considered a community, and what's really linking them together? And I don't really mean online communities, because usually online communities are centered around one thing. But even in that case, right? Like, you look at like any popular game, like Warframe. You take the Warframe community, right? Everybody has a different opinion. Like, you've got subgroups in there. You've got like major voices. You know, you've got tons of people. You can't judge the community, right? You're judging the people that want to be heard. But if you have a real community, say 30 people, right, who have their own lives, have their own routines, but it's a small enough amount of people where you can make the camera fall 24/7. It's a small amount of people where you can really know them, you know, all on a fairly individual level without it being a stress. You know, like, you could have like a town hall in someone's home, really. Like, that's the sort of community I think really needs to exist, and that I feel like we're losing. You know, 400 people was way too big, but it did help that everybody sort of got packed in together every now and then, because, you know, we had no Walmart. we had no real store at all. Like, we had the corner store, which was not on a corner. It was at the edge of town, which was really, it was like the start of the town. And it got a bunch of stuff in. You could buy stuff. But, you know, like, if you wanted the newest, like, brand of Flamin' Hot Cheetos or whatever, like, you can't go here. You gotta drive 45 minutes to fucking Dandridge or something and go to a Walmart. So it really, the only way to get things was, it was a very community structure, and my mom really liked this. I don't think we'd be better off if we had stayed there, but I wish it wasn't a crack town now, because now it's like, there was like this big fucking like government project to move more people into the area, and that's another problem, right? When you have these rural areas that get a lot more people, like, there's not enough work, realistically, in this capitalist society, you know, in these areas, and it's the mountains, right? So you can't travel very far very fast. So people just get addicted to drugs. You know, they get used to being able to live for basically nothing and just sort of subsiding. It's like, you know, people talk about how sometimes food stamps aren't enough. We're gonna hold this. How about that? People talk about how, like, sometimes food stamps aren't enough. Well, in a place like this, food stamps can cover your whole month and more, you know? Like, you get your food stamps in, you drive to the nearest Walmart or the nearest like food city, and you go fucking wild, right? And, you know, usually you do this every 2 weeks, say, because you don't want shit to spoil. But especially that second trip, you really just use up every last food stamp dollar they give you, because you've got plenty. Even people living with families and such, you know. Because you, like, there was like no fucking local taxes, right? Which is a godsend, but also the roads were a little bit shit, so I will give them that. But it wasn't that big an issue. Like, I knew a guy, and I was a bit young when this happened, so I didn't really have as much of that community structure. But There was one guy that would, like, he had previously worked construction, and he would come out and he'd fix things up for basically nothing. Because he still worked construction. He wasn't around all the time. This is just his house. So he would come through and he'd, like, repair parts of the road. He'd, if anybody had, like, their houses damaged in storms or accidents or whatever, he'd help you out with those. Just whenever he was around. Because he could get a lot of these supplies from his job. And when you think about the yearly income for most of the people living in the area, that's a ton of money saved. And that's a community thing, It's like you live where I live. You're really not gonna drive 5 miles to somebody that like got their house damaged in a storm to use your free supplies to fix their stuff up. And it's not because this guy was a super nice guy, but it's because if you upkeep your community, they'll upkeep you, right? It's exactly how we think of our elders, Like if you put work into your children, they'll put work into you when you need it. And now that doesn't always work out, but the point of the community structure is for us to build just an area that we can exist in. And I really feel like we have way too many fucking people. Like our smallest towns are bigger than ever before. And I know there are small towns out there. There's small towns around here, and I'm not attacking that, right? Like, it's very difficult for me to go to any of these places because a lot of them don't have internet. And that's not a I need internet thing. That's a I need to pay off my loans. And my whole career is in computers. But, yeah. So, and I've been following, I've been reading John Muir's 1,000-Mile Walk to the Golf. And it's been a very slow read so far. I'm only like a quarter in because I've had a lot of work and I haven't been reading much. But one of the things that he really picks up on is that whenever he goes through these places where people actually are, it's very communal. It's not tons of people that don't exist together. It's, people that I don't know, like, what do you want to call it? People that tolerate each other at the very least and will put in the work for each other if need be, Like, this is not like a fucking saloon where the town itself has 10 people and most of the people that come through are travelers, This is people doing their best to just fucking live their lives. And the only way to really do that is to just help out your fellow neighbor. I think that's another thing we've lost by losing the community is, like, fucking homelessness. And a lot of people will say this. Homelessness is an outcome of laziness, right? And I don't completely agree with that. But I think there are people that are homeless because they're lazy. And I don't mean, people like me, where it's like, you don't want to live in this society and just work a fucking desk job every day, so you pack everything up and live out of your car. I'm talking about the people that live on the street, that beg for change every day. I talk to a lot of these people, especially the ones that live downtown, and a lot of them are, addicted to drugs. A lot of it, I'm not going to say it wasn't their fault, but there's so many fucking people, a lot of people in my family even, that, they have some sort of accident doing whatever, labor job they could get to keep themselves up, and they've got insurance, because that's what you're supposed to do in America, and what does the doctor do? He gives you a fuck ton of pain pills. People take these pain pills, and the pain never really goes away, even after they've stopped getting the pain pills. So they seek out alternatives, right? They might just buy the same pain pill from somebody else, on the street. They might buy fucking cocaine. It's a very difficult situation. But I don't know. I'd like to talk more about communities. I'd like to go back up into the mountains around here. Maybe some of the areas that aren't like crack infested, and